Welcome to this episode of UXD. This is the last episode of a three-part series where I share best practices for designing and building location-based mobile apps that are sure to delight smartphone users who are on the go. In this episode, we'll focus on the design implications driven by the constraints placed on users and their smartphones due to environmental conditions. I'm your host, Nazmul Idris, a developer advocate passionate about design and mobile. In part one, I talked about the importance of understanding user context for location-based apps. Typically, research and planning tasks are done on tablets and laptops, and smartphones tend to be used on the go for execution tasks. Now, users on the go tend to be quite busy doing other things and can be really distracted. So not only do we have to take the human hand into account and optimize the interaction design for single-handed use, but we also have to take the human brain into account. So in part two, I talked about how you can make location information on maps glanceable and easy to consume for users on the go. Now, I'll talk about environmental factors that are outside the user and their smartphone, which have a huge impact on the type of experience that they're going to get from their location-based app. In other words, we're going to talk about building and designing applications for the real world. So when users are on the go, chances are they might be outside. And if they need to glance at some information on their phones, then outside lighting becomes a huge factor on whether they'll be able to read this information in the first place. In fact, you have to read it in order to process it first, right? So if it's really bright and sunny outside, and the UI uses very subtle gradients with similar colors and low contrast between foreground and background, that allow the user to discern the boundaries between objects and layers, then all this will be lost. In fact, all this subtlety, which probably took a lot of effort to create and tune, will just be totally washed away, and the user will not be able to see much because of the lack of contrast, which would be a shame. So keep this in mind when you're thinking about glanceable information for users on the go. UX design is all about industrial design and utility and not the fine arts. You must also make sure that font sizes and images are large. Most countries where smartphone use is prevalent have an increasingly aging population. This means that you have to be mindful of whether the UI that you're handcrafting to perfection is just too small for someone with even less than ideal vision to even see. And finally, brevity is key in delivering content to users who are on the go. People are distracted. They're doing other things in the real world, so keep it short. It's much more difficult to make something short and useful than to ramble on, so put in the work to make this happen. Keep brevity in mind when you're thinking about information to display to the user. Prioritize on their behalf when you know that they're on the go, and they'll thank you for this. But also, give them a way to get more information if they want it. So one of the biggest environmental factors that can affect the user experience is the type of connectivity that's available to the user right now. And we've all experienced cellular and Wi-Fi connectivity can vary greatly from one location to the next. And again, this is especially true for users who are out and about. One minute you have great network coverage, and the next minute you might have little to no coverage, and then back to great coverage again. So depending on when the user interacts with your application, they might be delighted or utterly disappointed. Now, there's a variety of reasons why coverage changes. There might be a lack of cell towers nearby, there might be a lack of Wi-Fi access points nearby, and there might be wireless signal congestion, for example, in a packed conference. Or it could be occlusion, which is when you go through a tunnel or you're in an elevator. And there's like a variety of other reasons why connectivity could be spotty. Now, a great way to manage this is to ensure that your location-based app has offline mode. Gmail for Android is a shining example of this. It hides whether you're online or offline from the user entirely. In fact, you can compose emails without connectivity, and these are just queued for delivery, but are actually sent when Gmail has connectivity. So now you can view emails and attachments that you have already downloaded to the device without any network as well. You just have to figure out, for your application, which use cases are critical, and ensure that there's an offline mode and an online mode design and implementation for those use cases. Now, these use cases should execute without any network coverage, using only local resources on the device. And when connectivity is restored, this content should be synced to whatever backend services you need. All is happening without the knowledge of the user. It's important to note that offline mode isn't important just because wireless connectivity can be unreliable. It might also be the user's choice to be in offline mode to preserve their data plan. It's irresponsible for developers and designers to assume that all users have unlimited data plans. Cell phones and data plans, as you know, cost a lot of money, and there's a lot of different constituents if you look at the demographics for smartphone users. So this is another reason why it's really important for you to truly understand the user of your application or product. You should do the UX research that's needed to understand your user so that you can get an idea of how important it is that you not wreck their data plan. Now, this could be one of the key features that makes your application more attractive to a certain set of users. So again, do your user research and make informed decisions. When we start talking about offline mode, prefetching and caching can't be far behind. Caching is something that you should do as often as you can, and it's something that can be done with very little development cost in most cases. So there's very little excuse not to do this. Once you've downloaded any data over the network, you should try and save this to local storage in case your user might need it again. So as they go back through the flow of your application, the information is already there. Caching also ensures that the user sees some data, which is better than no data, even if that information is stale. So on that note, make sure to invalidate and refresh your cache as it makes sense in the context of your location-based application. The Google Play Music app on Android does a great job of this. It caches any played music on the device's local storage so that when you go back to play that music again, it's already on the device, and it does not have to be downloaded and streamed over the network, costing precious bandwidth. Prefetching is a slightly more difficult thing to implement than caching, but there are many situations where it can deliver tremendous value to the user, especially for location-based apps. It makes it so that as the user flows through your application, as they move forward, prefetching takes care of making sure that information is available before they need it. Now, caching helps the user go back smoothly through your application, and prefetching helps them move forwards more smoothly. What am I talking about? So let's say you have a geofenced, let's say that you have an application and you've geofenced a location. Now, let's say that your user enters this fence. This might trigger your application to prefetch some information that they're likely to need very soon. And when the user actually tries to access this information in the near future, they'll be delighted when this information shows up instantly. Because from their perspective, there was no lag or delay, there were no loading screens. Magic happened and the information was there before they needed it. How awesome is that? So from the user's perspective, again, load times are bad, and you want the information to show up instantly. And it's all about managing perception. So the actual performance isn't so important from a user's perspective as the perception of that performance or perceived performance. Now, the Google Maps navigation app is great at doing this. Before you start navigating to a route, it downloads a fair amount of routing data so that if there are glitches in connectivity while you're moving, it won't impact the directions that the app provides you with, which is awesome. It can even reroute you without network connectivity on the journey, which is even awesomer. This is a really, really important thing because when users are actually on the go, they have no patience for connectivity issues bubbling into the user experience. So that's all the time we have for this episode. Keep these three things in mind: the user's hand, the user's attention, the environmental conditions that affect the user and the device, and this will allow you to build great location-based experiences on mobile. And also remember that these constraints are not compromises. Without constraints, this would go from UX industrial design to the fine arts. However, creating a design and implementation that violates these constraints will certainly compromise the experience of your product for your user. If you haven't already, please be sure to join our UX community on Google+. It's a place where we can continue this discussion and meet other people who are just as passionate about user experience as you are. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.